Radha Madhava Jaya Kunja Bihari Radha Madhava Jaya Kunja Bihari Kopijana Bhava Grivadari Jaya Grivadari Kopijana Bhava Grivadari Jaya Grivadari Yasodanandana Rajadanaranja Jaya Rajadanaranja Yasodanandana Rajadanaranja Jaya Rajadanaranja Yamunadiravachari Jaya Kunja Bihari Yamunadiravachari Jaya Kunja Bihari Radha Madhava Jaya Kunja Bihari Radha Madhava Jaya Kunja Bihari Jaya Radha Madhava Jaya Kunja Bihari Jayam Vishnupad Paramhangsa Brahmadakacharya Asadhara Sutu Shri Shriman His Divine Grace Shalasi Bhaktivedanta Swami Raj Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai Gaur Premanande Haribo Slava Zarani Bhaktam Slava Shri Guru Shri Grangi. You read 42 yesterday?
Yes.
Om Agyanatimirandasya Gananjana Salakaya Chaksurmilitam Yena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha Shri Chaitanya Manobishtam Stapitam Yena Bhutale Swayam Rupa Kadamaya Dati Swapadantikam Vandeham Shri Guru Shri Utapadakamalam Shri Gurum Vaishnavam Scha Shri Rupam Sagrajatam Sahagana Raghunatam Vitam Tam Sajivam Sadvaitam Savadutam Prajana Saitam Krishna Chaitanya Devam Shri Radha Krishna Padan Sahagana Lalita Shri Visakam Vitam Scha Hey Krishna Karna Sindhu Dinabandha Jagapate Gopesha Gopika Kanta Radha Kanta Namosute Tapta Kanchana Gaurangi Radhe Vrindavaneshwari Vrishabhana Sudhadevi Pranamami Hari Priye Vanchakapa Tuvyascha Kripa Sindhubhyevacha Patidanam Bhavanebhyo Vaishnavebhyo Namo Namaha Shri Krishna Chaitanya Pranityananda Shadwaita Gadadhar Shivasadi Gaur Bhaktivinoda Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Srimad Bhagavatam, Canto 10, Chapter 1, The Advent of Lord Krishna, the Introduction, text number 43. Jyotir Vodaka Partivesh Vadaha Samira Veganugatam Vibhavyate Evam Swamaya Rajitesh Vasaupuman Kuneshu Raga Nugato Vimuyati Jyotiryatai Vodaka Partiveshvadaha Samira Veganugatam Vibhavyate Evam Swamaya Rachiteshvasopuman Kuneshu Raganugato Vimuyati Ladies, Jyoti, the luminaries in the sky, such as the sun, the moon, and the stars. Yatha, as, evam, indeed, udaka, in water, parthiveshu, or in other liquids, like oil, adaha, directly, samira vega anugatam, being forced by the movements of the wind, vibhavyate, appear in different shapes, evam, in this way, samaya rachiteshu, in this situation created by one's mental concoctions. Asau, the living entity. Puman, person. Guneshu, in the material world. Manifested by the modes of nature. Raga anugataha, according to his attachment. Muyati, becomes bewildered by identification. Translation and purport by His Divine Grace A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Srila Prabhupada. When the luminaries in the sky, such as the sun, such as the moon, the sun and the stars, are reflected in liquids like oil or water, they appear to be of different shapes, sometimes round, sometimes long, and so on, because of the movements of the wind. Similarly, when the living entity, the soul, is absorbed in materialistic thoughts, he accepts various manifestations as his own identity, because of ignorance. In other words, one is bewildered by mental concoctions because of agitation in the material modes of nature. Purport. This verse gives a very good example by which to understand the different positions of the eternal spirit soul in the material world and how the soul takes on different bodies. Dahantara prapti. The moon is stationary and is one. But when it is reflected in water or oil, it appears to take different shapes because of the movements of the wind. Similarly, the soul is the eternal servant of Krishna, the Supreme Personality of Godhead. But when put into the material modes of nature, it takes different bodies. Sometimes as a demigod, sometimes a man, a dog, a tree, and so on. By the influence of Maya, the illusory potency of the Supreme Personality of Godhead, the living entity thinks that he is this person, that person, American, Indian, cat, dog, tree, or whatever. This is called Maya. When one is freed from this bewilderment and understands that the soul does not belong to any shape of this material world, one is situated on the spiritual platform Brahmabhuta. This realization is sometimes explained as nirahankara, nirakara, or formlessness. This formlessness, however, does not mean that the soul has no form. The soul has form, but the eternal agitating form is acquired because of material contamination is false. Similarly, God is also described as nirakara, which means that God has no material form, but as Satchitananda Vigraha. The living entity is part and parcel of the Supreme Satchitananda Vigraha, but his material forms are temporary or illusory. Both the living entity and the Supreme Lord have original spiritual forms, Satchitananda Vigraha. But the Lord, the Supreme, does not change his form. The Lord appears as he is, whereas the living entity appears because material nature forces him to accept different forms. When the living entity receives these different forms, he identifies with them, and not with his original spiritual form. As soon as the living entity returns to his original spiritual form and understanding, he immediately surrenders to the Supreme Form, the personality of Godhead. This is explained in the Bhagavad Gita 17.9. Bonam janmanam ante jnanamam prapadyate. When the living entity, after many, many births in different forms, returns to his original form of Krishna consciousness, he immediately surrenders unto the lotus feet of the Supreme Form, Krishna. This is liberation. As the Lord says in the Bhagavad Gita 18:54, Brahma Bhuta Prasanatma Nashoshiti Nakangshiti Samaksaveshu Bhuteshu Mad Bhaktim Levate Param. One who is thus transcendently situated at once realizes the Supreme Brahman and becomes fully joyful. He never laments nor desires to have anything. He is equally disposed to every living entity. In that state he attains pure devotional service unto me. Surrender unto the Supreme Form is the result of bhakti. This bhakti, or understanding one's own position, is the complete liberation. As long as one is under impersonal understanding of the absolute truth, he is not in pure knowledge, but must still struggle for pure knowledge. Klesho dikataras tesham avyakta sakta chetasam. Bhagavad Gita 12.5. Although one may be spiritually advanced, if one is attached to the impersonal feature of the absolute truth, one must still work very hard, as indicated by the words klesho dikataraha, which means greater suffering. A devotee, however, easily attains his original position as a spiritual form and understands the Supreme Personality of Godhead in his original form. The Lord himself explains the forms of living entities in the second canto, second chapter of Bhagavad Gita, where he clearly says to Arjuna that he, Arjuna, and all other living entities who are previously in their original forms are separate individual identities. They were individuals in the past, they are now situated in individuality, and in the future they will all continue to maintain their individual forms. The only difference is that the conditioned living entity appears in various material forms, whereas Krishna appears in his original spiritual form. Unfortunately, those who are not advanced in spiritual knowledge think that Krishna is like one of them, and that his form is like their material forms. Avajananti mamudha manushim tanam ashrityam. Bhagavad Gita 9:11. Krishna is never puffed up by material knowledge. He is therefore called achyuta, whereas living entities fall down and are agitated by material nature. This is the difference between the Supreme Lord and the living entities. In this connection it is to be noticed that Vasudeva, who was situated in a transcendental position, advised Kamsa not to commit further sinful activities. Kamsa, a representative of the demons, was always ready to kill Krishna or God, whereas Vasudeva represents a transcendentally situated person to whom Krishna is born. Vasudeva is the son of Vasudeva. Vasudeva wanted his brother-in-law Kamsa to refrain from the sinful act of killing his sister, since the result of being agitated by material nature would be that Kamsa would have to accept a body which would suffer again and again. Elsewhere in Srimad Bhagavatam 5.5.4, Rishabdev also says, Nisado manye yata atmano yam asannapi kleshida ashadeha. As long as the living entity is entangled in fruitive activities of so-called happiness and distress, he will receive a particular type of body in which to endure the three kinds of suffering due to material nature. Three tapa yantrapa utrana. An intelligent person therefore must free himself from the influence of the three modes of material nature and revive his original spiritual body by engaging in the service of the Supreme Person, Krishna. As long as one is materially attached, one must accept the process of birth, death, old age, and disease. One is therefore advised that an intelligent person, instead of being entangled in so-called good and bad fruitive activities, should engage his life in advancing Krishna consciousness, so that instead of accepting another material body, tyaktva deha panarjanma naiti, he will return home back to Godhead. So the text again, the translation. When the luminaries in the sky, such as the moon, the sun and stars, are reflected in liquids like oil or water, they appear to be of different shapes, sometimes round, sometimes long, and so on, because of the movements of the wind. Similarly, when the living entity, the soul, is absorbed in materialistic thoughts, he accepts the various manifestations as his own identity, because of ignorance. In other words, one is bewildered by mental concoctions because of agitation from the material modes of nature. Namo Vishnu Varaya Krishna Prasthaya Bhutale Srimate Bhakti-Vedanta Swami Namane Namaste Saraswatundeve Gauravani Pacharane Nirvishesha Srinivadi Paskyatyade Sadarana. In Bhagavad-gita, Krishna elaborately explains the transcendental position of ourselves. Now, right now, we may not feel very transcendental, but whether we feel transcendental or not, the fact is that we are transcendental. Because if we were not transcendental, then at every moment we would be changing, because the material nature is always changing at every moment, and yet we can observe by just a little self-awareness that we're not changing. We're the same persons. We're sitting here since the beginning of the lecture, and even at the end of the lecture, we'll still be here. And even if we go somewhere else, we'll still be the same person wherever we go. Therefore, in Bhagavad Gita, Krishna began his instruction by explaining that the soul is the same, but the body is different. At every moment, the body is changing, but eternally, we're always going to be the same. Now, the question is what we want to do. Now, in the beginning, when Arjuna was explaining that you're not your body, still Arjuna said, I may not be this body, but this body is quite agitating. So I may theoretically understand I'm not this body, but still I'm going to be affected by the body and by the fact that my dear and near relatives such as Bhishma, Deva, and Drona, they're going to be killed. I'm not going to feel very good about it. So I may not be my body, my gross body, and I may not be my subtle material mind. But still, if my mind feels bad, the only thing I'm aware of right now is how my mind feels. So I'll feel bad. So what to do about it? Sometimes we feel good, and sometimes we feel bad. It's called manic depressive. Everyone in the material world is manic depressive to one degree or another. One moment we're joyful, we're on top of the world, and the next moment we're distressed. The whole world is bad. So that's just normal material life. There's something called biorhythms, which you can actually track when you're going to feel good for the most part, when things are going to seem to go your way, and then it goes down. Oh my God, what happened? I was on top. It's like a roller coaster. Sometimes you're on top, you see everything, I'm on top of the world, and I'm on the bottom again. How is this possible? A nice person like me, how can I be on the bottom? That's just how the material world works. Sometimes we'll feel great, and sometimes we'll feel miserable. Sometimes we'll see everything clearly, supposedly, and sometimes we'll become bewildered. Sometimes we'll feel strong and healthy, and sometimes even to lift up, to get out of the bed will be difficult. And yet we're imagining that somehow or another I'm controlling this body, I'm controlling the universe, but material nature will show us that we're not the controllers. We're not the ultimate manipulators of the material energy. We're being manipulated by the material nature as long as we're absorbed in it. Now, if we become absorbed in Krishna, then Krishna will take over. Krishna's energy, the spiritual energy, will take over, and therefore we won't be manipulated by the material nature. Now, of course, we're not about to become fully absorbed in the spiritual nature. It's not going to descend, and we're going to be in the spiritual world, like Vidura. Wherever he went, Maharaj Yudhisthira said, you're actually carrying the spiritual world with you. And that's not just, it wasn't a theory. I think you might be carrying the spiritual world. You look like you were thinking of Krishna. No, it's actually an experience that Maharaj Yudhisthira felt, and it is from our recent history, when Prabhupada was in a certain place, then those who were receptive, and those who were not sometimes so receptive, they could actually feel that they were in the spiritual world due to Prabhupada's association. So we cannot imagine what Srila Prabhupada was experiencing, how deeply he was absorbed in the spiritual energy, that even by association, just like associating with fire, you can feel the heat and light. It doesn't mean you're in the fire, but you can feel by association how there's illumination and there is heat. So similarly, when the soul is absorbed in Krishna consciousness, then the spiritual nature does the activities. And when the soul is absorbed in material nature, then the material nature does the activities. One is very agitating and disturbing, the other one is very pleasurable and enlightening. Now in the beginning we may not notice so much the difference between enlightenment and happiness and spiritual and under the spiritual energy, and the happiness that comes from less agitation from the material nature, and to be able to understand things a little bit more clearly in the mode of goodness. But we noticed when we're by the mercy of the holy name, by the mercy of devotional service, sometimes we're a little bit more in goodness, and therefore we notice we're a little happier, a little bit more steady, a little bit more sane, and then we sink somehow or another by association or by the modes of nature into a lower mode, and we think now I'm unhappy, now I'm whatever. In other words, even when we're in goodness, we're identifying with the body as being peaceful, and when we're in passion, we identify with the body as being agitated. But actually, there's another stage where we're transcendental, but even the body doesn't become agitated anymore, even though it may appear to be sometimes. Like sometimes it would appear that Srila Prabhupada was angry, but actually he wasn't angry. He was manifesting spiritual anger. The energy of, like Nrsingadev. Nrsingadev apparently became angry when Hiranyakashipu wanted to kill Prahlad Maharaj, so there's spiritual anger. So Nrsingadev manifested that internal energy of spiritual anger, Rodra, which is also spiritually uplifting and pleasureful actually, and killed Hiranyakashipu, because without anger it's very difficult to kill anyone. But this is spiritual anger. Krishna was not envious of Hiranyakashipu because he understood Hiranyakashipu was his eternal servant, one of Jai and Vijay from the spiritual world. So as a father sometimes corrects his son out of affection, so he corrected Hiranyakashipu. Now our business is to become absorbed in the spiritual energy so that we no longer experiencing the agitation of the material energy. Our activities may apparently be the same, but our experience will be different. One is blissful and enlightening, the other one is agitating and bewildering. So that depends upon us at every moment. Now, Krishna told Arjuna, "You're not your body," and Arjuna said, "Well, it's true, I'm not my body, but this body's agitating me." So Krishna says, "Matra sparshu tukondiya, chitochna sukadukada, agama payamo nityas tam tatiksha svarata." That, yes, this body is going to be agitating, your circumstances are going to be agitating. There's so many things going wrong in the material world, because the material world is meant to go wrong. After all, we're going to die very shortly. That's the problem. Most people aren't looking forward to their happy death day. We sing happy birthday, as I've said many times, but we never sing happy death day to you, happy death, because people are not very happy at the time of death, generally speaking. But we're preparing so that we can be happy at the time of death. We can be as happy at the time of death as we are at any other time when we're fully conscious of Krishna. So that's our perfection. But we won't reach, unless we reach that perfection during our lifetime, we're not going to have that perfection at the time of death. It's not that at the time of death I'm suffering and I'm crying and someone comes along and puts a big smile on my face. Oh, now I'm happy. No, it has to become an internal purification and actually be under the spell of the internal energy, daivi prakritim ashitya. As Krishna says, daivi esha gunamayi mama maya dharatya mameva ye prapadente mayam etam dharantite. This divine energy of mine, consisting of the three modes, is difficult to overcome. It's even difficult to act in goodness when we're in ignorance or passion. We just can't do it. We can put on a happy face for a little while, and then the happy face turns into a frown when no one's looking. Like people walk in the street, they greet each other. "Hi, how are you?" "Oh, I'm fine." And the next, "Ooh." So we may pretend for some time that we're doing all right, but our real experience is what mode of material nature we're actually situated under. And since we have a long history of many births and many activities in the various modes, we're not exactly in charge of which mode we're going to be in the next moment. On the other hand, if we take shelter of Krishna, as proportion, if we tolerate the mode and not identify ourselves with it, because our tolerance means, first of all, not to identify, "Oh, now I'm happy, the whole world seems great. Oh, now I'm miserable, the whole world is falling apart." No, just understand that we're not this body and try to engage in devotional service, and that devotional service will put us under the internal energy, Mahatmanas Tumam Bharata, Daivim Prakritim Ashritya, and that spiritual energy will, to one degree or another, depending on our absorption in it, stop our agitation as being part of the material energy. So we have a solution all the time. The question is whether we're prepared to take it or not, or whether we want to suffer in the material world and look forward to a happy time in the mode of goodness for a few moments before we're dunked down back into ignorance and passion. Or we want to be under the internal energy and practice, as it says, Smartavyak Sadatam Vishnu, Vismartak Jatuna Kincha, to always remember Krishna. And always remember Krishna is not just a mechanical process, it's a process of relationships also. If we relate to this world and the people within the world in relationship to our service to Krishna, then we'll see Krishna everywhere. And if we just theoretically try to chant Hare Krishna, theoretically try to understand things, but not act practically in service to Krishna and his mission in this material world, then it'll just remain on the theoretical platform, And as soon as there's some agitation, then I'll be agitated, because I won't be under the... that's what the material nature is meant for, to agitate us. It's Krishna's energy. It's going to agitate us. No matter how theoretically we're trying to separate ourselves from it. And if we take shelter of Krishna, then we won't be in the material energy anymore, so it won't agitate us. We'll be in the spiritual energy. So that's our choice, which energy we want to be part of. And of course it takes practice to experience the difference between the spiritual energy and the material energy, and to differentiate it, and to desire to stay in the spiritual energy. We have to get a little bit disgusted, a little bit averse to the material nature. Otherwise, we get into the spiritual energy and we feel good, I'm happy, and then we think we can take a vacation in the material energy and fulfill our material desires. That will make us happy too. I gradually have to see the difference between fulfilling material desires and acting spiritually. So I'll stop there. Thank you. Any questions or comments? The whole material universe is a big classroom, and we're all students. Yes?
Krishna Maharaj, we were discussing yesterday what does it take for someone to get human form of life in next life. So there's devotees say sometimes that if he takes a book or if he hears Maha Mantra or...
Well, I'm not personally the super soul. So I don't, karma is quite, at every moment we're acquiring either karma or vikarma or akarma, our karma. So what the combinations are necessary, it's like, you have this roulette wheel and the ball's going around and there's so many places it can stop at. So the combinations, we're acquiring karma, but the fact is that Krishna consciousness generally brings one to a human form of life, but what kind of life you're going to get, human form of life, that will depend upon what the purity of our, not only our Krishna conscious activities are, how much we're doing them, and how much we're deviating sometimes, and what kind of deviations we have. If we think, well, I've acquired enough pious credit from chanting Hare Krishna, I'm doing service, now I can take a break in Maya, and I'll be all right because I'll go to the heavenly planets. You might go to the heavenly planets for some time, but when you come back, you may not be like the body you get. May not be the wonderful, beautiful, wealthy, strong, healthy body that you were expecting. We get the reactions for everything we're doing, spiritually and material. That's not to say that, we should be encouraged to do the right thing, Krishna's service, and then if we sometimes get into do the wrong thing, we shouldn't lament, because that's also another phase of Maya. Maya is always trying to get us to hanker, and after that then to lament. Try to enjoy and then lament afterwards. So we should avoid both phases, the up and the down. No. Let's try to do the best we can, and Krishna says, Niha bhikramanashasti pratyavayo nividyate swapam apyasa dharmasya trayate mahatobhaya. On this path there's no loss or diminution, and even a little advancement can protect one from the greatest danger. So we should just stop this hankering lamentation and try to do as much service in Krishna consciousness as possible, and not worry so much about exactly which kind of body I'm going to get in my next lifetime. Just pray that we get a body where I can serve Krishna and make more spiritual advancement. Anything else? Wala Grantharaj Srimad Bhagavatam Ki Jai, Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai, Gaur Premanande Haribol.